Hello, here's a quick rundown of a patch I made recently, and I've already done a tutorial on Ambient drone, so I don't want to repeat myself. Most of the VCV bits are roughly the same in the sound design, but I just wanted to focus on what makes this darker, and it's three things really. So there's an unusual scale with some kind of strange intervals musically, so I'll have a quick look at the music theory behind that. There's also a sampled layer, which is an FM patch, which has been resampled a couple of times. Then there's some weird kind of pitch shifting or some pitch modulation on the reverb, which also makes it sound a bit creepy. So let's get started, and the first thing I look at is the choice of scale. Because I'm not great at music theory, to be honest, but the good news is for Ambient drone you don't really need any, because the perceived wisdom is just stick your quantizer in C minor, it's just job done really. But I tend to think more in terms of intervals rather than scales. So if you're doing a regular ambient piece, I would use the tonic, then like the minor third, a fifth, you can't go wrong with a fifth, minor seventh, and maybe a ninth as well. So that's more like a chord than a scale. I mean, if you play all those notes at once, that's a minor ninth. And the good thing is, if you're using generative techniques, where you're basically playing random notes, you can choose any of those notes together and they'll all sound absolutely fine. So you can do the third and the fifth, the tonic and the minor seventh, the ninth and the fifth, and yeah, any combination is going to sound okay and kind of musical. But for this piece I wanted something that sounded more kind of strange and floating and unsettled. So I'm actually using a mode of the melodic minor scale, which is called Lydian Augmented, and the intervals in that are the tonic, perfect second, major third, then a sharp 4, and a sharp 5, then a major 7th. So I've left out the 6. I like to use kind of slightly fewer notes in the whole scale, just so you're not getting too many kind of dense clusters of notes. So I've just got 6 notes with those intervals. And if you play a few of those together, I mean, it's the sharp 5th that is really the kind of dramatic sound. But if you combine that with some of the other intervals, you just get these odd kind of things happening together. So if I just play a few of these together, so there you go. I can't really play piano, but that's a scale I'm using. And when you apply that scale to some big kind of ambient pad sounds, that's going to sound quite strange. So let's just have a look at the sample layer as well. If I just unmute this one. So this was actually an FM patch. I'll stick that up on screen so you can see what that looks like. I think I was actually frequency modulating the filter cutoff at audio rate, but it's all polyphonic. So you've basically got 16 oscillators being FM'd by another 16 oscillators. Then I doubled it up and tried a few different VCOs and filters, and it all got stupidly complicated, to be honest. And it's actually so complex it's pretty much ended up as white noise. But I actually sampled that and made a few different samples. So there's a higher one that sounds like this, goes on for some time, and there's a lower one which is more of a descending pitch thing. Then there's a short loop I made which loops around perfectly. So I got those 3 samples, then I put them into another patch which looks like this. That's just playing it back for some samplers. I then put that through some effects and recorded the whole lot and then looped it again. So it's basically loads of FM that's being sampled and multi-sampled, and it ends up sounding like this. I'll just turn that up a bit actually because you can't really hear it very well. Maybe go back to the start there. So that layer is just in the background. I've not filtered it or anything, it just comes in and out slightly. I'll just turn that down a bit. So for the rest of the oscillators, the main voice is the X Effect Wave VCO, because I love wavetables for ambient. Turn that down again a bit, that's too loud now. So you've got one wavetable oscillator, and then you've got another 2 VCOs, which are these pad oscillators here. and each VCO is going into a module called Polyfade. And what that's doing is just fading through the channels. So I'm playing all the notes into the oscillators at once, and then it's just sounding one note at a time by filtering out the polyphony channels. The reason I did that, I'll just show you actually. If I duplicate this VCA, so in my previous drone things, what I did is just modulate a VCA with an LFO. But you can see if you do that, you get quite a few channels at once. And using that scale, if you play too many notes at once, it sounds a bit of a mess. So what I did instead, I got this module here called Polyfade. I'll just zoom in a bit. So this is the Polyfade module, and all you do is you put the polyphonic input in, and then I've got the rate turned right down to 0.0 something. So it's just fading really slowly. So if I just bring in the first voice, this is the wavetable oscillator. And I've not done too much with that. I'm just modulating the odd and even harmonics. And then it's going through a filter. And the filter is slowly modulated as well via volt Cardinal down here. I think that's polyphonic as well, so each channel's getting slightly different modulation. So you can hear the wavetable there. Then the other two pads are just these dot B, which are quite kind of airy digital pads. I've just randomised those, and I think one's an octave higher, so that's the lower one on that channel. Then you've got a higher one on this channel, that's just coming in occasionally. Sometimes you don't get anything for a while, but I wanted this quite sparse. So you've basically got 3 VCOs, and they're just doing 2 notes each at once. So you've only ever got a maximum of 6 notes. That's just coming in there now. But you get these creepy intervals as you get 1 note at a time coming from each oscillator. So if I just bring in the other 2 VCOs, so when they combine together, you're getting some really weird chords. Then the final element is just this sub bass. That's a Pigments patch which I've used before. It's just using the utility oscillator. So if I go onto the utility engine here, you've just got this oscillator here, and there's a few other bits which I think I turned off for the video, because I wanted quite a clean, plain kind of sound. Okay, that's getting a bit loud actually. As you can hear, that's quite creepy. So the final thing, I'm going to demonstrate this with the piano sound. If I turn up the reverb on the piano, I'll just knock that off again. So you can hear that the pitch is slowly changing the reverb. I've actually used the VCV reverb, which you get with VCV Pro. You can do that with something like Plateau, obviously, just modulate the size. But I found if you modulate the time, you get this really kind of strange effect where it's just slowly shifting. I've also used Supermassive, and if we look at this, you can probably see the warp just changing very slightly. What I've done there, I've just put an LFO into the parameter here. So if you used HostFX, what you can do is you just click on one of these inputs here, and it goes into learn mode, and then you can move something, and then any input you put in there, any CV, will change the parameter directly. So that's a really fun thing to do actually, is to modulate VST plugins using all the modular bits in VCV. I don't know if you can see that, but the numbers changing there, and it's just changing it a tiny bit. I've got an offset module there, so it's not changing it too much. And you can hear it's just changing the pitch slightly, which gives it this kind of creepy effect. There's also some shimmer. What I've done there is, instead of going straight into the reverb, the send signal goes into a mixer. Then it goes into clouds, basically, texture synthesizer here, and that's up 2 octaves. And then that goes back into the mixer, and then you turn up the channel where that's feeding back, and you just get this pitch shifted feedback basically. So it's kind of a homemade shimmer and then some pitch mod as well. Sounds quite weird on the piano. And that's all it is really. So that's how I make dark ambient drone. Just get some weird samples, use a weird scale, and then just modulate the reverb and give it a weird pitch shifted kind of shimmer thing. And that's it. So I'll just bring everything else back in, and this is what it sounds like. There's one more thing actually. Each of the oscillator voices are going through these modules here, which is the Bog Audio pan module. I'm not explaining that because I've already done a tutorial on polyphonic panning, but it's basically just moving each voice separately instead of panning the whole lot. I'll put a link to the tutorial for that in the description, and also a link to the original ambient drone tutorial if you've not seen that one. That's my most popular video ever, strangely enough, which is weird because people don't listen to your music on YouTube, but they love watching tutorials on how to make the music that they don't listen to. I've never understood that, but anyway, yeah, I keep making these tutorials because they seem quite popular. So if anyone's still watching this point, thanks, and see you in the next one. Cheers.